The morning started like any other morning on Earth. People woke up, made coffee, sent their children to school, and complained about traffic. On Mars Colony, Governor Sarah Chen reviewed supply reports while sipping synthetic orange juice that never quite tasted right. In the Luna mining facilities, workers drilled for helium-3 to power the fusion reactors back home. 50,000 humans lived off Earth now, spread across 3 colonies and dozens of space stations. They were proud pioneers, but Earth was still home. Earth would always be home, then Earth disappeared. No explosion, no warning, no massive energy signature that scientists could point to and say, "There, that's what happened." One moment, the blue-green jewel hung in space where it had been for 4.5 billion years. The next moment, there was nothing. Just empty space and 12 billion people gone as if they had never existed. The first person to notice was a freight pilot named Marcus Webb. He was hauling ice from the asteroid belt to Mars when his navigation computer started screaming errors at him. Earth's gravity well had vanished from his calculations. Marcus thought his systems had crashed. He rebooted everything twice before he accepted what his instruments were telling him. He sent an emergency message to Mars Colony, his hands shaking so badly he could barely work the controls. Governor Chen thought it was a joke at first, a terrible, tasteless joke. But then the confirmations came flooding in. Luna Base reported that Earth was gone. The orbital stations reported that Earth was gone. Every telescope, every sensor, every instrument that could point at where Earth should be saw the same thing. Nothing. The panic started slowly, like a fire that begins with a single spark. Then it exploded. On Mars, people flooded the communication centers, desperately trying to call home. The lines were dead. Every single connection to Earth, every data stream, every video call, every message, all of it ended in silence. Parents couldn't reach their children. Children couldn't reach their parents. Husbands and wives screamed at blank screens that showed only static. Governor Chen declared martial law within 6 hours. She had no choice. People were breaking into supply depots, stealing food and water, fighting in the streets. Everyone understood what Earth's disappearance meant. Mars Colony could survive for maybe 3 years on its own supplies. Luna Base had less, 18 months if they were lucky and careful. The orbital stations had weeks. The scientists worked around the clock, trying to understand what had happened. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the investigation. She was a quantum physicist who had been studying some unusual energy readings from Earth just before the disappearance. She and her team analyzed the data over and over, looking for clues. What they found made no sense. There was a quantum signature in the empty space where Earth had been, a kind of ripple in reality itself. Dr. Tanaka told Governor Chen that Earth hadn't been destroyed. It had been moved, removed, taken somewhere else, but where? And by what? And most importantly, why? Those questions haunted the survivors. Some people believed aliens had taken Earth. Others thought it was a scientific experiment gone wrong. Religious groups claimed it was divine judgment or divine protection. Nobody knew. Nobody could know. All they had was an empty hole in space and the terrible weight of being the last humans alive. The gravitational chaos caused by Earth's disappearance made everything worse. Without Earth's mass, the orbits of the inner planets began to shift. Mars experienced massive dust storms as its orbit destabilized. Luna, with no planet to orbit, went spinning off into space. The survivors on Luna Base had to evacuate in a desperate rush, cramming into every ship they could find and fleeing to Mars before their facilities broke apart. The first year was the worst. Half the orbital stations failed, their life support systems breaking down without the supply chains from Earth. 3,000 people died in those failures. Mars Colony nearly collapsed twice, once from food riots, once from a reactor meltdown that was stopped only because a brave engineer named David Kim manually shut down the core while being exposed to lethal radiation. He saved 15,000 people and died 3 days later. But humans are stubborn creatures. They adapted. Governor Chen organized the survivors into work crews. Every person had a job. Every resource was tracked and rationed. The hydroponics farms expanded. The 3D printers ran day and night manufacturing spare parts. Engineers retrofitted the colony systems to run on less power. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't easy, but it worked. After 5 years, Mars Colony was stable. After 10 years, they had expanded into 2 new dome complexes. After 20 years, they had ships capable of reaching the nearest star system. The survivors didn't just endure, they grew, but they never forgot. Every child born in the colonies learned about Earth. They learned about forests and oceans, about rain and snow, about birds and whales and all the things that existed only in videos now. They learned that they came from a place that vanished, that they were orphans of a lost world. Other alien species eventually found them. The first contact happened in 2289, 42 years after Earth disappeared. The aliens were called the Varani, and they were friendly enough. They expressed sympathy for humanity's loss. They offered trade agreements and limited technology exchanges. They called humans the orphaned ones, and seemed to view them with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Humanity spread slowly across the stars. They established colonies on 3 nearby systems. They made treaties with a dozen alien species. They joined the Galactic Council as a minor member, grateful for the chance to participate in something larger than their own survival. But every human, no matter where they were born, knew the story. They knew that once upon a time humanity had a home called Earth. They knew it had vanished, and they never stopped wondering if somehow, somewhere it still existed. The sensor alarm started screaming at 0347 hours Galactic Standard Time. Commander Thekvol of the Galactic Council monitoring station near the Sol system jerked awake in his quarters, his forearms flailing in confusion. Something massive had just appeared in the inner solar system, something planet-sized. He rushed to the control center, his heart pounding in his chest. The other officers were already there, staring at the displays with expressions of shock. Where there had been empty space for 500 years, there was now a planet. A living, breathing world with oceans and continents and an atmosphere rich with oxygen. "Is it Earth?" Thekvol whispered. Every species in the galaxy knew the story of the vanished human homeworld. It was taught in schools as a cautionary tale about the dangers of experimental technology. "Confirmed," his sensor officer replied. "Spectral analysis matches historical records." "That's Earth, Commander." It came back. Thekvol immediately sent an emergency message to the Galactic Council headquarters. This was beyond his authority to handle. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. Earth, the lost human homeworld, had returned after 5 centuries of absence. Diplomatic ships from a dozen species began heading toward the Sol system. The Jathic Empire, the dominant military power in the galaxy, sent a full battle group. The Merchant Collective sent their finest negotiators. The Council sent ambassadors with prepared speeches about welcoming Earth back into the galactic community. Everyone wanted to be there when humanity's cradle was finally returned to them. But as the ships approached Earth, they discovered something unexpected. Earth's orbital space wasn't empty. Dozens of structures ringed the planet, massive platforms that pulsed with energy signatures the visitors had never seen before. The technology was completely unfamiliar. It didn't match anything in the galactic databases. The Jathic battleships, confident in their superiority, moved forward with weapons powered and shields raised. They had dealt with primitive civilizations before. This would be simple. Then the message came. It broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, in 47,000 different languages, including languages of species that had gone extinct thousands of years ago. The voice was calm and clear. "This is Earth Central Command. We have detected your approach. State your intentions immediately. Any hostile action will be met with defensive measures. This is your only warning." Admiral Krathzor of the Jathic fleet laughed. He had faced hundreds of battles and never lost. What could a planet that had been missing for 5 centuries do to his advanced warships? He ordered his vessels to continue their approach, ignoring the warning. The human response was instantaneous. Every Jathic ship suddenly stopped moving. Their engines still ran. Their power systems still functioned. But the ships themselves were frozen in place as if held by invisible hands. The weapon systems went dark. The shields collapsed. Inside the vessels, nothing worked except life support and basic communications. Admiral Krathzor tried everything. Emergency protocols, backup systems, even ancient override codes passed down through generations of Jathic warriors. Nothing worked. His mighty fleet was helpless, trapped like insects in amber. The human voice spoke again. "You have been immobilized as a demonstration. You are not harmed. You will remain in this state until you acknowledge peaceful intentions. We could have destroyed you. Remember this mercy." The other alien ships stopped their approach immediately. The merchant collective representatives broadcast surrender messages in every language they knew. The council ambassadors stammered apologies and explanations. No one had expected this. No one had imagined that Earth might have changed during its absence. After 12 hours of being frozen in space, Admiral Krathzor finally sent a message accepting Earth's terms. Immediately, his ships were released. The systems came back online as if nothing had happened. The Admiral, a warrior who had never known fear, felt his hands trembling as he gave the order to withdraw to a safe distance. The council ambassadors approached more carefully now, broadcasting peaceful intentions and requests for dialogue. Earth responded by inviting them to send a small delegation down to the surface. Only unarmed diplomatic vessels would be permitted. Ambassador Lorix of the council volunteered to lead the mission. She was a Varani, one of the species that had befriended humanity after Earth's disappearance. She had personally worked with the scattered human colonies for decades. She wanted to understand what had happened to humanity's lost homeworld. When Lorix's shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, she saw something that made her breath catch. The planet was beautiful beyond description. The cities glowed with clean energy. The oceans sparkled. Forests covered vast stretches of land. But more than that, she could see structures that seemed to blend technology and nature in ways that shouldn't be possible. Buildings that grew like trees, gardens that floated in the air, transportation networks that seemed to fold space itself. The shuttle landed in what appeared to be a capital city, though it looked nothing like any city Lorix had ever seen. A human delegation waited for her. They looked mostly human, 2 arms, 2 legs, the familiar shape. But there was something different about them. They moved with an unusual grace. Their eyes held a depth of knowledge that seemed ancient. The leader stepped forward. She introduced herself as Director Elena Vasquez, representative of the Earth Collective. She smiled warmly and gestured for Lorix to follow. "Welcome back to Earth," Elena said. "We have much to discuss. You probably have many questions. What happened to you?" Lorix asked immediately. "Where did Earth go?" "It's been 500 years. Elena's smile turned sad. "For you, it has been 500 years. For us, it has been much longer. 50,000 years longer, to be precise." Lorix felt her legs go weak. "That's impossible. Time doesn't work that way." "It does when you're trapped in a pocket dimension with different physical laws," Elena replied. "Come. Let me show you what humanity became when we were forced to survive alone for 50 millennia." As they walked through the city, Lorix saw technology that made her own species' achievements look primitive. Citizens moved through the streets with devices that seemed to respond to their thoughts. Medical centers where humans were being treated for injuries that would be fatal anywhere else in the galaxy. Schools where children learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. But it wasn't just the technology that shocked Lorix. It was the people themselves. They seemed happy, content, and utterly confident. They had built a paradise from their prison. "We need to contact the scattered colonies," Elena said. "Our brothers and sisters who survived Earth's disappearance. Can you help us reach them?" Lorix nodded slowly. She was already thinking about how the galaxy would react to this news. Humanity hadn't just survived their disappearance. They had evolved into something beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. And that, she realized with a chill, would terrify the powers that ruled the stars. The message reached Mars Colony at exactly noon local time. Governor James Torres was in a budget meeting when his assistant burst through the door, her face pale and her hands shaking. She didn't even apologize for the interruption. She just held up her tablet and pressed play. The holographic display showed a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. She wore clothes that looked both familiar and strange, clearly human design but made from materials that seemed to shimmer with their own light. When she spoke, her voice carried an accent that Torres couldn't place. It sounded old, ancient even, like she was speaking a version of English that had evolved separately for thousands of years. "To our brothers and sisters of the scattered colonies. This is Director Elena Vasquez of Earth. We have returned. We are home. And we have so much to tell you." The room went silent. For 500 years, the scattered humans had mourned their lost homeworld. They had built monuments to Earth. They had preserved every recording, every image, every memory of the planet that had vanished. And now it was back. Within hours, every human colony in the galaxy had mobilized. Ships departed for the Sol system carrying representatives from Mars, New Terra, and Fortuna Station. The journey would take weeks even with the fastest drives, but nobody cared. They were going home. Torres led the Mars delegation personally. He had been born on Mars, had never seen Earth except in historical archives, but he still felt the pull. Every human felt it. Earth was in their bones, in their dreams, in the stories their grandparents had told them. When Torres's ship finally emerged from faster-than-light travel near Earth, he pressed his face against the viewport like a child. There it was, the blue marble, the cradle of humanity, home. But as they approached, Torres felt his excitement mixing with unease. The orbital platforms surrounding Earth were massive, gleaming with technology he didn't recognize. The energy readings were off the scale, and when his ship requested permission to approach, the response came from an AI system so advanced that his ship's computer couldn't even properly interface with it. The landing was smooth, guided by invisible forces that seemed to cradle the ship and set it down as gently as a feather. Torres and his delegation stepped out into air that smelled impossibly clean and fresh. The sky above was the perfect blue of old Earth photographs. They were met by a reception committee of humans who looked mostly normal, but moved with an unsettling grace. Director Vasquez greeted Torres personally, shaking his hand with a smile that seemed genuinely warm. "Welcome home, Governor Torres," she said. "I know this must be overwhelming. Where were you?" Torres asked, unable to contain the question any longer. "Where did Earth go?" Vasquez gestured for him to walk with her. As they moved through the landing area, Torres saw more and more things that didn't make sense. Gardens that floated in the air without support. Buildings that seemed to be grown rather than built. People who moved through solid walls as if they were holograms. In 2247, our scientists were testing an experimental quantum drive, Vasquez explained. Something went wrong. Earth was shifted into a pocket dimension. A small universe with different physical laws. We couldn't get back. We were trapped. Torres did the math in his head. That was 500 years ago. For you, Vasquez said gently. For us, it was 52,000 years. Time moved differently in the pocket dimension. Much faster. Torres stopped walking. His legs felt weak. 52,000 years? We tried everything to return, Vasquez continued. It took us 30,000 years just to understand what had happened. Another 15,000 to develop the technology to reverse it, and several thousand more to prepare Earth for the return. We knew we would be coming back to a galaxy that had moved on without us. Other delegations were arriving now. Representatives from New Terra, from Fortuna, from the dozen small colonies that humanity had managed to establish. Torres watched as they all experienced the same shock, the same confusion, the same overwhelming sense of awe at what Earth had become. A young woman from New Terra named Sarah Kim approached Vasquez with tears streaming down her face. "We struggled so hard," she said. "After you disappeared, we barely survived. We had to fight for every resource. We lived in domes and underground shelters. We watched friends die from preventable diseases because we didn't have the technology to save them. And you were here building paradise?" Vasquez's expression turned sad. "We didn't have a choice about where we went or how long we were gone. We would have given anything to come back sooner. To help you, to save those who died, but we were trapped in our own kind of hell. Yes, we had time to advance, but that time was bought with isolation and desperation. We didn't know if we would ever see the rest of humanity again." Over the next few days, the delegations from the scattered colonies toured Earth. They saw the medical facilities where diseases were cured with a single treatment. They saw the educational centers where children learned skills that seemed like magic. They saw the manufacturing plants where matter was assembled atom by atom. And they saw the military defenses that had frozen the Jothic fleet without effort. The contrast between the two branches of humanity was stark and painful. The scattered colonies had spent 500 years struggling to survive with limited resources. Earth had spent 50,000 years perfecting every aspect of their civilization. The gap was enormous. Tensions began to emerge. Some colonists felt abandoned even though logically they knew Earth hadn't chosen to disappear. Others felt inadequate, comparing their modest achievements to Earth's miracles. A few felt angry, bitter that they had suffered while Earth had thrived. Torres met with the other colonial governors in a private session. "What do we do?" asked Governor Patel of New Terra. "They're so far ahead of us. What's our place in this new order?" "We survived," Torres said firmly. We kept humanity alive when we thought we were the last ones. That matters. That's worth something. But even as he said it, he wondered. Earth had returned with technology that could reshape the galaxy. What role would the scattered colonies play in what came next? Vasquez requested a meeting with all the colonial leaders. When they gathered, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. The Galactic Council will demand that Earth submit to their authority, she said. They'll want us to accept their rules, their limitations, their hierarchy. We're going to refuse. That's suicide, Patel said. The Jothic Empire alone has thousands of warships. They'll crush any resistance. Vasquez smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Let me show you something. She led them to an observation deck and activated a display. It showed projections of Earth's military capabilities. The governors watched in silence as the presentation demonstrated weapons that could manipulate gravity, shields that existed in multiple dimensions, and defensive systems that made the Jothic arsenal look like children's toys. We didn't spend 50,000 years just building pretty cities, Vasquez said. We prepared. We knew that when we returned, we would need to be strong. Strong enough that no one could ever take Earth from us again. Torres stared at the displays. You're going to start a war. No, Vasquez said. We're going to end one. The galaxy has been under the Council's thumb for too long. Species are kept deliberately weak, their development controlled. We're going to change that. And we're asking you, our scattered brothers and sisters, to stand with us. You survived without Earth. You built something from nothing. That makes you valuable beyond measure. Together we can reshape the galaxy. The colonial governors looked at each other. They had spent 500 years learning to navigate galactic politics carefully, never making waves, always staying small and unthreatening. What Vasquez was proposing went against everything they had learned, but it was also everything they had ever wanted. A chance to stand proud instead of pitied. A chance to honor those who had died in the struggle to survive. A chance to show the galaxy what humanity could become when given the freedom to reach their full potential. Torres took a deep breath. Tell us what you need. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Located on the neutral world of Sanctuary Prime, it had been built 3,000 years ago to house the representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. The ceiling rose 50 meters high, covered in holographic displays showing the territories of the Council's dominion. The seats were arranged in a circle, with the most powerful species positioned on elevated platforms that looked down on the lesser members. Humanity had been granted a seat in this chamber 200 years ago, after proving they could maintain 3 stable colonies and contribute to galactic trade. It was a small seat, located in the lower ring where minor species sat. The human representative, Ambassador Marcus Zhang of Mars Colony, had learned to speak carefully in this chamber, to never challenge the established order, to always be grateful for whatever scraps of recognition the Council provided. But today, Marcus wasn't alone. Director Elena Vasquez sat beside him, representing Earth. She had refused the traditional Council robes and instead wore a simple but elegant suit that seemed to shift colors slightly as she moved. She sat with her back straight and her head high, looking around the chamber with an expression of polite interest. High Chancellor Vornath of the Council called the session to order. He was a Tekvol, a species known for bureaucratic precision and inflexible adherence to protocols. His 4 eyes fixed on Vasquez with obvious disapproval. We welcome Earth's representatives to this chamber, Vornath said, his voice flat and formal. However, we must address serious concerns. Earth has returned after 500 years of absence. By Council law, any civilization that undergoes significant temporal displacement must submit to evaluation and integration protocols before being recognized as a full member of galactic society. Vasquez stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient noise from the holographic displays seemed to fade. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast room. We appreciate the Council's concern, she said. However, Earth will not be submitting to evaluation protocols. We are here to engage with the galactic community as equals, not as supplicants seeking approval. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives from dozens of species began shouting objections and demands. High Chancellor Vornath called for order, his face darkening with anger. Earth does not have the authority to reject Council protocols, Vornath declared. These laws exist for good reason. They maintain stability and peace. They maintain control, Vasquez corrected calmly. We've reviewed the Council's history during our absence. We've seen how you treat species that develop too quickly or show too much independence. The Kareth were quarantined for developing advanced AI. The Solmani were embargoed for refusing to share their energy technology. The Yith were destroyed completely for building weapons you deemed too dangerous. Your protocols aren't about peace. They're about maintaining the power of the species who sit on the highest platforms in this chamber. Admiral Krathzor of the Jothic Empire rose from his elevated seat. His massive form was covered in ceremonial armor and his voice rumbled like thunder. You dare to question the Council's authority? You who represent a world that abandoned its own people for 5 centuries. Marcus Jang tensed, but Vasquez simply looked up at the Admiral without fear. We didn't abandon anyone, Admiral. We were taken against our will. And yes, we question authority that uses fear and force to suppress the natural development of civilizations. The galaxy deserves better. Careful, human, Krathzor growled. You've demonstrated advanced technology, yes. But the Jothic Empire commands 3,000 warships. We have reduced entire systems to ash when necessary. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Vasquez smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile. And do not mistake our restraint for fear, Admiral. We've studied your empire during our isolation. We know your capabilities. We also know your limitations. Shall I list them publicly? Or would you prefer to avoid embarrassment? The chamber went absolutely silent. No one spoke to the Jothic like that. The Empire had been the Council's enforcement arm for over 1,000 years. Their military might was unquestioned. Species trembled when Jothic warships appeared in their skies. Krathzor's eyes narrowed dangerously. You test us, human. That is unwise. We defend ourselves and our principles, Vasquez replied. That is necessary. The Council can choose how to respond. You can accept Earth as an equal partner in a renewed galactic community, or you can attempt to enforce your will through military means. But I warn you, Admiral, the age of bullying lesser species into submission ends today. High Chancellor Vornath held up his hands, trying to restore order. This session is getting out of control. Perhaps we should adjourn and continue discussions through diplomatic channels. No, said Merchant Prince Zolix of the Collective, speaking for the first time. The Collective controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes and economic systems. I want to hear what Earth proposes. Director Vasquez, you claim the current system is unjust. What would you put in its place? Vasquez turned to address the entire chamber. Freedom. Real freedom. An end to technology restrictions that keep species deliberately primitive. An end to economic systems that extract resources from developing worlds. An end to military enforcement of arbitrary laws. We propose a galactic community built on cooperation and mutual respect, not fear and control. Chaos, Vornath said flatly. You describe chaos. Without structure and limitations, species will war amongst themselves. Advanced technology in the wrong hands leads to destruction. And who decides which hands are wrong? Vasquez challenged. You, the Jothic, the species who already have power. The current system ensures that those at the top stay at the top and everyone else stays controlled. That isn't peace. That's oppression. Marcus Jung had listened to his share of speeches in this chamber, but he had never heard anything like this. Vasquez was challenging the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. And more shocking, some of the representatives were listening. He could see it in their faces. Species from the lower rings, the ones who had been kept small and weak for centuries. They were hearing hope for the first time. Admiral Krathzor stood again. Enough words. The Jothic Empire has maintained galactic order for a millennium. We will not allow one upstart species to undermine that order. High Chancellor, I request authorization to deploy a battle fleet to Earth's system. We will resolve this matter decisively. You will try, Vasquez said quietly, and you will fail. But many will die in the attempt. Is that really what you want? Or can we find a better way? There is no better way, Krathzor snarled. There is only order and chaos. Strength and weakness. The strong rule. That is the law of the universe. Then perhaps, Vasquez said, it's time the universe learned new laws. The session ended in chaos. Representatives were shouting, arguing, forming alliances. Marcus watched it all with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. For 500 years, humanity had played by the Council's rules, had accepted their place as minor players. Now Earth was throwing out the rulebook entirely. As they left the chamber, Marcus pulled Vasquez aside. They're going to come for us. The Jothic will bring everything they have. I know, Vasquez said calmly. Let them come. The galaxy needs to see what happens when brute force meets true innovation, and they need to see that humanity won't be controlled, won't be limited, won't be kept small ever again. And if you're wrong? Marcus asked. If their fleet is too much even for Earth's defenses? Vasquez looked at him with those ancient eyes that had seen 50,000 years of human struggle and triumph. We're not wrong. Humanity survived being lost for millennia. We turned a prison into paradise. We mastered sciences the galaxy considers impossible. We're not wrong, Marcus. We're just finally strong enough to be right. Behind them, the council chamber continued to erupt in arguments and accusations. The galactic order, stable for thousands of years, was beginning to crack. And at the center of that crack stood Earth, returned from the void, ready to reshape everything. The HFY War fleet assembled at the edge of the Sol system like a storm gathering on the horizon. 3,000 warships, each one capable of reducing a city to ash with a single bombardment. It was the largest military force the Empire had deployed in 200 years. Admiral Krathzor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and watched the tactical displays with satisfaction. Earth hung in the distance, blue and green and vulnerable. The orbital platforms that had frozen his advance force months ago were still there, but Krathzor had learned from that mistake. This time, his fleet carried specialized weapons designed to disrupt quantum fields. His scientists had worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures. The humans would find no easy victory this time. All ships report ready for battle, Admiral, his tactical officer announced. Krathzor bared his teeth in what his species considered a smile. Then let us teach these arrogant humans their place. All ships advance. Weapons free. Show no mercy. The fleet surged forward, engines blazing. 3,000 ships moving in perfect formation. An unstoppable tide of military might. In the colonies, humans watched the tactical feeds with fear and hope warring in their hearts. On Mars, Governor Torres had evacuated all non-essential personnel to underground shelters. On New Terra, Governor Patel had ordered all ships to be ready for immediate evacuation. If Earth fell, the scattered colonies would be next. But on Earth itself, Director Vasquez stood in the Defense Command Center with an expression of calm determination. Around her, holographic displays showed the advancing HFY fleet in perfect detail. Officers monitored systems and called out status reports. But there was no panic, no fear. Just professional focus and quiet confidence. They're committed to the attack, one officer reported. All ships have weapons armed and shields at maximum. Good, Vasquez said quietly. Let them come within range. We need to make absolutely certain of their intentions. The HFY fleet crossed into Earth's defensive perimeter. Warning messages were broadcast and ignored. The leading warships began charging their main weapons, preparing to fire on Earth's cities. Now, Vasquez said, the Earth defenders didn't fire weapons. They didn't launch missiles or beam attacks. Instead, they activated a system that had taken 20,000 years to develop and another 10,000 to perfect. A dimensional field generator that didn't destroy or damage, it simply removed. Around every single HFY homeworld, around every colony and military base, around every ship and station that belonged to the Empire, space itself folded and twisted. Barriers appeared, invisible but absolutely impenetrable. The HFY worlds weren't destroyed. They were isolated, quarantined, placed into pocket dimensions where they could live their lives in peace but could never harm another species again. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Krathzor watched in horror as his connection to the Empire's homeworlds went dark. Every communication channel, every data feed, every sensor reading, all of it showed the same thing. The worlds of the HFY Empire had vanished, just as Earth had vanished 500 years ago. What have you done? He roared into the communication channel to Earth. Vasquez's face appeared on his screens. She looked sad but resolute. We've given your empire what it gave so many others, isolation. Your worlds are safe, Admiral. Your people are unharmed. But you will no longer threaten or control the galaxy. The barriers are permanent. We've removed you from the equation. You've destroyed us, Krathzor screamed. We've saved you from yourselves, Vasquez corrected. Your empire was built on conquest and domination. Now you can learn to build something better. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when your people have evolved beyond the need to rule through fear, the barriers will come down. Until then, you're free to live in peace within your own isolated space. The admiral's screen went dark. Around him, his officers stood in shocked silence. The mighty Jothic Empire, undefeated for 1,000 years, had been neutralized without a single shot fired. Their fleet still existed, but it was meaningless now. They had no homeworld to return to, no empire to serve. Across the galaxy, the reaction was swift and dramatic. Species that had lived under Jothic domination for centuries began to celebrate. The council chamber erupted into chaos as representatives demanded answers, made accusations, or simply fled. High Chancellor Vornath attempted to call for sanctions against Earth, but his authority was crumbling by the second. The Merchant Collective, always pragmatic, was the first major power to recognize the new reality. Merchant Prince Zolik sent a formal message to Earth proposing new trade agreements and economic partnerships based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Other species quickly followed. Within days, the old council structure had effectively collapsed, but Vasquez knew the work was just beginning. She called for a new gathering, not on Sanctuary Prime with its architecture of intimidation, but on Earth itself. Representatives from across the galaxy were invited, not just the powerful, but everyone. Species that had never been allowed a voice in galactic affairs suddenly found themselves with invitations to help shape a new order. The conference took place in a facility that Earth had built specifically for this purpose. Unlike the old council chamber, this one had no elevated platforms, no hierarchy of seating. Every representative sat as an equal. The ceiling was transparent, showing Earth's sky and the stars beyond. Vasquez stood before them all. We didn't remove the Jothic Empire out of revenge or hatred. We did it because it was necessary to break the old system. For too long, this galaxy has been ruled by the principle that might makes right. Today we establish a new principle. Freedom and cooperation make progress. A representative from the Kareth, a species that had been quarantined for developing AI, stood up. What guarantee do we have that Earth won't simply become the new oppressor? You've demonstrated power beyond anything we've seen. What stops you from controlling us the same way the Council did? It was a fair question, and Vasquez had expected it. Nothing stops us except our own choices. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to free it. To prove that, we're going to share our technology. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Sharing advanced technology violated the most fundamental council laws. It was the one thing that had never been allowed. We'll share selectively and responsibly, Vasquez continued. Species that want to develop faster will have access to knowledge and tools that can accelerate their progress. Medical technology that can save lives. Energy systems that can power civilizations without destroying planets. Educational resources that can help cultures grow. We're not going to hand weapons to anyone who asks, but we're also not going to keep beneficial technology locked away to maintain an artificial balance of power. Over the following months, the galaxy transformed. Species that had been held back for centuries suddenly had access to technologies they had only dreamed of. The Solmani shared their energy innovations freely, no longer afraid of embargo. The Kareth developed AI systems that revolutionized everything from medical diagnosis to space navigation. The Varani, who had always been peaceful traders, became the foundation of a new interstellar economy, based on fair exchange rather than exploitation. Not everyone accepted the changes peacefully. Several species attempted to seize the moment to attack old rivals or grab territory. Earth responded by placing temporary barriers around aggressive species, isolating them until they agreed to participate in the new system peacefully. It was the same medicine they had given the Jothic, not destruction but time out. Governor Torres of Mars found himself in an interesting position. The scattered colonies, which had struggled for survival for centuries, suddenly became valuable bridges between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. They understood both the desperation of limited resources and the potential of human achievement. They became mediators, teachers, and ambassadors. Sarah Kim, the young woman from New Terra who had cried when first seeing Earth, ended up leading educational programs that helped other species understand and adapt to rapid technological change. Marcus Zhang became one of the chief negotiators in establishing the new Galactic Compact, a set of principles that prioritized freedom, cooperation, and mutual growth over control and limitation. 20 years after Earth's return, Ambassador Lorix of the Varani visited Director Vasquez in Earth's capital. They stood together in a garden that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. with flowers that bloomed in colors that shouldn't exist. Do you think it will last? Lorix asked. This new age you've created? Vasquez smiled. Nothing lasts forever. In 1,000 years, maybe less, the galaxy will face new challenges. But we've given them something important. Proof that change is possible. Proof that the way things are isn't the way things have to be. That's worth something. And the Jothic? Lorix asked. Will you ever release them? When they're ready, Vasquez said. We monitor their isolated space. We see their society slowly changing, evolving. In a few more generations, when they've learned that strength doesn't require domination, the barriers will come down. Everyone deserves a chance to grow. Lorix looked up at the stars. Earth was lost, and in being lost, you found something the rest of us had forgotten. Hope. In the final analysis, that was Earth's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their technology, not their power, but their refusal to accept that anything was impossible. They had been torn from their place in the universe and cast into a pocket dimension that should have been their tomb. Instead, they had turned 50,000 years of isolation into 50,000 years of growth. They returned not seeking revenge, but offering freedom. They showed that the strong didn't need to dominate the weak, that advanced civilizations could lift up others rather than suppressing them, that the galaxy could be better if everyone was allowed to reach their full potential. And as new species continued to join the galactic community, they all learned the story of Earth, the planet that vanished, the people who endured, the civilization that came back and changed everything. The Jothic had called it the law of the universe that the strong must rule. Humanity proved a different law, that resilience, innovation, and compassion were strengths greater than any weapon. And that changed everything. Years turned to decades. Decades turned to centuries. The galaxy flourished under principles of freedom and cooperation. And Earth, the world that had been lost and found again, continued to explore the stars, not as conquerors or controllers, but as partners in an endless adventure of discovery. Some species still told their children the old warnings. Be careful, or you'll disappear like Earth did. But now those warnings carried a different meaning. They weren't about tragedy. They were about transformation, about how sometimes being lost is the only way to truly find yourself. And somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, Earth's dimensional drives hummed with familiar power, because humanity had learned something in their 50,000 years of isolation. The universe was infinite. Reality was flexible, and there were always new horizons to explore. The question was never whether humanity would survive. The question was what wonders they would discover next.